All right. This is Articles of Confederation 2020 critical period. Please take notes, you guys, as I go through these slides. And if something doesn't make sense, make sure that you do ask me. You can email me or we can check in on Friday. So let's get started. Okay, so critical period, 1781 to 1789. Baby America is born, right? There's independence now. Everything is great. Well, no, not exactly. They have to build a new nation, and it has never happened before, so everything is totally like an experiment. They have to get it right, or it's not going to last. So anyway, let's get started and find out what is happening. Okay, so just to recap a little bit, I had to go back and change some stuff, you guys. Sorry. So towards the end of the revolution, after the capture of Yorktown, they decide, okay, we need to start talking about what's going to happen here. So America at this time Baby America has some serious decisions to make and problems to face in the new state that they're in. A couple of the big things that they need to worry about: foreign policy issues, right? They need to worry about Britain, again, because even though they gained independence from Britain, they still depend on Britain. They're going to have to depend on Britain for trade. So they're going to have to fix their relationships, remember? And we have John Adams over there being an ambassador, so hopefully that's going to help. With France, Spain, and the Netherlands, we owe them money. We need to pay them back. And you have to pay back the people that owe you money, or it's not going to work out the second time around, right? If you ask for money in the future, they're going to say, no, are you kidding me? You never paid us back. They have economic issues at home. The economy is a mess. Remember, there's enormous debt to pay back, not only to the foreign nations, but also people at home, a lot of the people that fought. There's rampant inflation, a lot of debtor unrest, and we're going to talk a lot about this money that they owe to the veterans and what happens here. This is going to be one of the reasons, or one of the highlights on how weak the Articles of Confederation really was. And then lastly, unity issues, right? Right before the revolution, on the eve of the revolution, we decided Americans were not united. And just because they won the independence, it doesn't mean that now they were all super united. So yes, it did increase support for America, but some people are still very much retaining their regional and colonial identities, which we're going to see all the way through the Civil War, even after the Civil War, even now. So this is not going to all of a sudden go away. So they do have issues here that they're still kind of worried about. Okay, so while the revolution is still being fought, you guys, Second Continental Congress in 1776 is going to be called upon, right? It's going to call the colonies to draft the new constitution. So all of your 13 independent colonies now need to say, okay, we're going to come together to form a new union. So they're going to try to come up with their state constitutions, because at this time all of the states do have their own constitutions, and they're going to try to fit all 13 of them into one, which you're going to see it's going to become a big issue. So this idea of republicanism is introduced. So sovereignty of new states would rest on the authority of the people. So what does this mean? It means that most of the power, you guys, is going to be in the states. And why did they do this? Well, because what they had with the British, right, the monarchy, they gave too much power to the federal government, to one main person. So they're not going to want a federal government right away. So they're like, no, let's just keep it in the states. The people are going to have the power. So the features of these state constitutions, most had a Bill of Rights, which is going to allow people or give people certain rights, right? It's going to require annual election of officers, but they all create a weak executive and judicial branch by present day standards. So they actually don't even have an executive branch. They don't want a president at this time. Why? Because of what King George did. They're like, we don't want to go through that all over again. They don't want a judicial branch. Because prior to this, what was happening to a lot of people under the courts with the British? They were just getting thrown in jail, right? They weren't even served trial or anything like that. So they're like, we don't want that. We just don't want to deal with that. And still, one of the biggest problems is that they're not very unified, because every colony is kind of looking out for their own good. So it's going to be kind of hard to govern the whole states with this Articles of Confederation, which is ultimately why it, did not work out. All right, so the Articles of Confederation are going to be adopted officially in 1777, and it creates this League of Friendship. It's going to take a while to get ratified. So they do not get ratified until 1781. Mostly because there was a lot of land dispute. between states, and they were like trying to figure out like, well, no, this is still part of Virginia. No, this is part of Maryland. Anyway, they were fighting back and forth. But then eventually it does get ratified in 1781. And again, one of the big issues here, colonies still working as independent, self-interested bodies. Okay, so what were some of the provisions? Like, what did the Articles of Confederation say? Okay, 13 states joined to deal with common problems, right? Foreign policy, so on and so forth. Congress was the chief agency of the government, no executive branch. Just like the states did not want governors, they also did not want a president to be a president of the United States. Again, why? Because of the whole too much power that King George had. They're like, we don't want that. No judicial branch. I already told you why. When it comes to voting, each state has a single vote. Now, this is going to be a big issue, you guys, because think about the way it's set up now. You have a bicameral house that has a Senate and House of Representatives. Your House of Representatives votes depend on population. Senators, every state gets 2 no matter what. Well, back then they only had what would kind of be considered like a Senate, right? Every state gets the same amount of vote. So every state gets 1 vote. If you're a small state like New Hampshire, you like this because you may only have 500 people living in New Hampshire, but your vote is representative to that of like the state of Virginia that had a ton of people. So if you're a Virginian at this time, you should not like this. So this is why it's going to change. Any bill that was introduced was going to require 2/3 vote. So two-thirds of the colonies had to vote on it. And then amending functions of the government under the Articles required unanimous consent, which we know will never happen. And that's not even what it is today because you're just not going to agree to it. So it was pretty much impossible to amend anything. Okay, so why did it ultimately fail? Well, it's going to lack the balance of power. I already told you. Small states could block larger states. Like New Hampshire could block Virginia because Virginia had more people, right? Because they had the same amount of power even though it wasn't representative of the people and the amount of people in their states. Now, the other thing that's going to be an issue, you guys, is money, collecting money. Like we said, the United States at this time owes a lot of money to a lot of countries and even to veterans. So there wasn't a system set up in place to collect money, and taxes were not a thing back then. So it's not like they had income taxes like we have now. So how could they make money? Well, there were only 2 ways to make money at this time. This way, like to tell states, okay, you owe us money, but it was based on a goodwill system. So each state did say, okay, we'll contribute money, but there wasn't a central power that could come in and collect taxes or make sure that everyone was paying their taxes. The other way was through the selling of land, surveying and selling of land, which we'll get to in some of the upcoming slides. So this is going to become an issue because what ends up happening is some states, like Virginia, are going to pay their taxes. You know, they're like, okay, sure, we owe money, we're going to pay. But then you have other states that are not paying. So it just didn't work out. Several states are still quarreling over boundary issues, so there's going to be a lot of armed clashes. No national court system. So what's going to happen to interstate crime? Well, you have convicts and thieves running from one state to another. Not very good at all. So you commit a crime in one state and then you just jump to another. Differing economic policy. So some states are placing tariffs on goods from other states. We don't do that right now. We just do it for other countries. And the tariff, you guys, is just a tax coming in, like an import, right? But at this time, they were taxing each other. Some states were printing depreciated paper currency. And some were competing with others when it came with other states when it came to trade. So the economy is still a mess. And some are still even printing continentals, which at this time we know are not worth anything. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you're going to pause because something big has to happen here to highlight all these failures, all these weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, right? There had to be something, and something made it change. So you're going to go in now and you are going to open up Shays' Rebellion. And you're going to read about Shays' Rebellion, what was happening here. So I encourage you to read and annotate the text and then come back and go through these questions so that you know and understand Shays' Rebellion very well. I will debrief this with you on Friday to make sure that we all have an understanding of Shays' Rebellion, because it is one that you have to understand. It is a turning point. It's kind of like Bacon's Rebellion, right? So Shays' Rebellion is another one that's a big turning point in the United States. It has shaped the United States to be what it is today. So go through these questions. You have a couple here. And then hopefully by then you know already what happened with Shays' Rebellion and why it had to change. Okay, so up till now we have been focusing on the weaknesses of the Confederation. We know it didn't work, but now I want to tell you about the successes of the Articles of Confederation, because there were some things that did work out. So the first thing you have here is the Land Ordinance of 1785. So Congress, oh my gosh, I can't talk, you guys. Congress establishes a policy for surveying and selling the Western lands. As I said, up to this point, there is no way to make money other than this goodwill system that states say, yeah, we'll pay to help pay our funds, and two, by selling and surveying land. That's it. That's the only way they were raising money. So the land in the old Northwest Territory, which is modern day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, would now be sold, and any of the money here would be used to pay for national debt. Okay, so the way it worked, the region here was split into townships, 6 mile squares, split into 36 sections of 1 square mile each. I'll show you a grid so you know what it looks like. The 16 sections set aside to be sold for the benefit of public schools. This doesn't mean that every 16th section they built a school. It just means that the money they made from that 16th section was set aside and used for public funding. This is another area where the North takes this, like, where education's a bigger deal in the North than it is in the South, right? We talked about another instance with your Puritan. So this is another way that the North totally beats the South when it came to education. Okay, so apparently this grid system is still very apparent in the Midwest, and this is why the Midwest is the way it is. I have not been to the Midwest other than Illinois, but I did hear that if you go, it is still very much, you can still see all the grid stuff happening here. Okay, it says contrasted land south of Ohio River, where some, oh, I already told you that about school. Okay, so the next slide is just a map here of the old Northwest Territory. So you see all of that highlighted, right? In the darker yellow, that's where this new land was being surveyed and sold. Okay, here is the grid that you guys, that I was talking about with the way it was sold, the land. So the 16th square, the money there would go to schools. Not that they would build a school. Just keep that in mind. Okay, another success here, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Don't confuse this one with the Land Ordinance. The Land Ordinance has to do with the sale of land. This one is completely different. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is going to be a big deal, because you need to know that this one is about abolishing slavery. You guys, I really can't talk. Abolishing slavery in lands. Prior to this, there wasn't any rule about abolishing slavery anywhere. So now they're saying in this old Northwest Territory, we are forbidding slavery. This is a huge deal. Huge deal. So make sure you star this one and that you know this one. And if you see the Northwest Ordinance 1787, you know automatically this is with the Old West, or the Old Northwest Territory, and they are forbidding slavery. The other thing too, it's going to set up a rule on how territories become states. And territories become state in the following way. At this time, they said, okay, once you have 60,000 people in a territory, then it could become equal state with, or equal status with the state. So you're going to draw up your constitution, you're going to send it to the federal government, and you're going to say, I want to be a state, and then they became a state. But the big thing here is the whole forbidding of slavery in this area. It says also, by not subordinating states, it ensured peace between eastern and western states. What this means, you guys, is that instead of saying, okay, can we just add territory to a new state? No. You just had to come up with a whole new state, right? It also ensured new states would be formed and old ones would not be extended, and again set precedents of North as anti-slavery. Oh my gosh, I'm having such a hard time talking, but I hope you guys are understanding this. Okay, so the number one failure of the Articles of Confederation is probably money, right? It is an absolute disaster. We still don't know where our money is. Tariffs are irregular. Trade's irregular. We're printing too much money. Pensions cannot be paid. Debt to foreign countries can't be paid off. So something needs to happen. So Mr. Alexander Hamilton becomes like the pro-economist at the time, and he proposes this Annapolis Convention. Only 5 states show up. Still not very united. But they do come together, and the principal purpose here is to improve interstate commerce. Only 5 states show up. The rest said the weather was bad, but I think that they just really didn't care. Anyway, Alexander Hamilton gains a commitment for a constitutional convention the next year in Philadelphia. The purpose would be to overhaul the Articles of Confederation. They knew it was time for a constitution. All right, so this doesn't really change things, but it works one thing. One success is they agreed to meet again in Philadelphia to revise the Articles of Confederation. They try to get more people to come next time. Hamilton and Madison both agree they need to go get Washington to come back. And they are going to try to get him back. He tried to retire, but they said no. So anyway, this is it with the Articles of Confederation. Your Constitutional Convention comes next. And that's what we will go over on Friday. Okay, you guys? That was kind of a mess. I'm sorry, but, makes sense here. All right, so if you want to review the Articles of Confederation, you have some questions here. What was the primary reason the U.S. government was on shaky ground in its early years? How were the values of the American Revolution translated into practice with the Articles of Confederation? What is significant about each state having an equal vote in Congress? How did Articles of Confederation contribute to Shays' Rebellion? How did Shays' Rebellion contribute to the development of the Constitution? And in what ways did Congress attempt to address the issue of slavery under the Articles of Confederation? All right, that is it. I hope you were paying attention. You may or may not have quick check-in. Well, you will have a quick check-in on Thursday, Friday, about Articles of Confederation and Shays' Rebellion, because this one's important. All right, see you guys Thursday, Friday.